Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. The Missouri General Assembly is more than halfway through its session, and a lot of things are going on. Today we have an update with Charlie Davis, our local state representative. Thank you for being here today.
Always, Judy. Thank you for having me.
If you were to look at what you've accomplished halfway through now, looking back, well, how would you characterize this session?
I think so far it's been very productive. We haven't gotten everything across the finish line. As you know, and most of the viewers know, the last month of our session is usually when we get the bulk of our legislation across the finish line. And the reason that is, of course, we're getting testimony from individuals, and it takes a long time to go through the process. We've all seen the what was the name of the program? The School Rock, where how a bill becomes law.
Right, step by step.
And it's a long, drawn-out process, and it is very cumbersome, and sometimes it takes months to get things across the finish line. And I think that's good. Slow government, I think, is really the appropriate government to make sure that we do get it right. But so far this year, I think is very productive. We have done some things that are allowing businesses to create jobs all across the state, which is one of the main things that we need to focus on.
Focus on economic development. Are there any things that you would point to that we've already passed this bill? This is something we've, taken care of in the first 2 weeks.
One of the most important things that we can do is for government to get off the backs of businesses through the regulatory process. Government many times regulates businesses to the point that they go somewhere else. They want to go to a state that's got favorable tax policy and favorable regulatory policy. One of those entities, of course, is the aluminum smelter down in southeast Missouri. We actually had a special session at the end of last year to address that issue. Well, it has been announced that they are starting up. They are hiring about 450 employees at an average salary of about $80,000. And for the Boot Heel of Missouri, which is usually a low-income part of the state, that is a huge boost for that area, not only in 450 people getting jobs, but the revenue that's going to come in, number one, to the state, and then also the sales tax revenue and the amount of money that's going to be spent in that local community. So if I look back at so far some of the things that we have done, protect life as well as to allow businesses to create jobs. And that's huge, especially for that area.
And that was something acted on pretty quickly,
very quickly, absolutely.
Dealt with that and tying that together. Well, as the session's gone along, I know people have followed it, a lot of topics, a lot of issues. Of course, right now, everybody's talking about the budget because the House, you've kind of handled your side of what are we going to do with the budget?
We've got our portion done, and now the budget is over in the Senate's lap. We're going to see what they do to it. Most people that understand the process knows that once the Senate gets the budget, they pretty much do what they want with it, and then they send it back to us. We don't agree, so we go to what's called a conference committee, and we fight. We make sure that our priorities are strengthened, and then they fight for their priorities also. But the budget that we pass out of the House is a balanced budget. Unfortunately, it's a larger budget this year than it is last year because the natural growth of the Medicaid cost, the growth of pharmaceutical costs, et cetera, from one year to the next, is causing us to spend quite a bit more money every year, so that way we can take care of the people that absolutely need it. So every year we spend a little bit more money, and we are a little bit less than $29 billion this next fiscal year 19 is what our budget is. But it is a balanced budget that the House provided. Missouri has a constitutional requirement to have a balanced budget on a daily basis. So sometimes when the governor withholds money, he does it because revenue's not coming into the state. But everybody that has done their tax returns realizes that obviously the state's got more money in it because we're not holding those tax returns back. Tax returns are being issued, and the refunds are going out almost immediately that they come in.
So that was an issue in previous years.
It's been a very important issue in years. Out of all the issues that I get calls from my constituents, it seems January through first part of April we get lots of calls because people are asking, where's my tax return? And this year, we actually have the money to actually pay them.
Right. So some description of the budget. I know that you have a lot of elements, like you mentioned, the Medicaid, the health side of things. We're at Missouri Southern State University. People watching are wondering, well, what does this mean for higher education?
Well, higher education should be very pleased. When the governor gave his budget to the legislature, we were pretty much shocked because there was a huge cut to higher education. As a matter of fact, last year he withheld quite a bit. Now, he has a constitutional requirement. Remember I talked about the balanced budget? If the money is not coming in, he has to cut from somewhere. and it seems like the only place that he can ever cut from is education. It's kind of hard to take medicine away from grandma, so he doesn't cut those type of things. But when he did his budget, there was a huge cut to higher education, totally unacceptable to me and to the legislature as a whole. So we fought really hard to put that money back in. So what it looks like out of the House budget is higher education is not going to get a funding cut, period. We're going to allow the colleges and universities to increase tuition at no more than 1%. And if they do that, then the college universities are going to get the same amount of money that they got last year. Plus things like Missouri Southern with our cooperative dental program. We're going to fund that this next year and then put that in the core. So next year we won't have to put that individually in there. And hopefully we can put that in the core and not have to worry about it again. But higher ed should be pretty pleased with what we've done. We still have to wait to see what the Senate's going to do. And I promise you we're going to fight for higher education. Because we want to make sure that we have an educated workforce. You can't do that if people can't afford college. And Missouri is one of the states that we have very affordable tuition. As a matter of fact, Missouri Southern has got, I believe it is the lowest, if not one of the lowest tuition rates in the state, which I think is something to be proud of because we want our local kids to get a good quality education that's affordable. And we're going to fight to make sure that that money stays in for not just Missouri Southern, but all of our colleges.
Now, what about the K through 12? You know, just across the state line, we're hearing about big problems in Oklahoma. You know, funding for the elementary, education K through 12. How are we dealing with that in Missouri?
Unfortunately for Oklahoma and Kansas, they made a decision to cut taxes to the point where they didn't have enough money to fund education. And that's sad. They should not have done that. And Missouri, the tax cuts that we have done over the past 8 years have been a slow, incremental tax cut because we did not want what happened to Kansas, Oklahoma to happen to Missouri. K-12 education this year has gotten $40+ million more dollars. We have fully funded the formula. So our teachers are very pleased. Our superintendents and our school boards are very pleased with the budget that we proposed. Because it does fund education. Compared to Kansas and Oklahoma, we're doing very well.
Right, so when people hear those stories about the other states, they look at Missouri and say,
oh absolutely. And not that I ever want anything bad to happen in other states, but when other states make mistakes and do things inappropriately or in a wrong way, and it looks really bad, people come to us and say, thank you for doing a good job, that we don't have these problems that many other states have.
Another area we've heard a lot about tying into budget is transportation funding. You know, our highways, there's a lot of need that people say for repairs or building new ones. How is the budget going to handle this?
You know, we stuck in another $167 million for MoDOT this year. And what we all need to understand is they're buy down dollars, which means for every $1 that or every $20 that we put in, the federal government gives us $80. Okay. So the more money that we put in for transportation, the more we get from the federal government. And we did $167 million more this year. I do not think that we necessarily need to do a gas tax this year because we did the $167 million. I'm always opposed to tax increases without voter approval. So if there's any idea that there's going to be a gas tax talked about, it's going to have to go to the vote of the people to get my support and let the people make that decision. We do have good roads in Missouri. Do we have potholes? Sure. I think every state has potholes. But when you look at our highways and our bridges, compared to many other states, we're doing pretty good with the resources we have. Missouri, back a dozen years ago or so, paved almost every double-lettered highway in the state of Missouri, which means out of 50 states, we have the 7th largest amount of paved roads in the country.
Operated by the state.
Operated by the state, which makes it pretty expensive. And I remember when that was going through, there were a lot of farmers that didn't want those double-lettered roads paved because they kind of liked that gravel road, so that way they didn't have people running up and down the roads that didn't need to be there. But because of that, there's an extra increase in cost to maintain them. Like I said, if there's going to be a gas tax, it's going to have to go to vote of the people for it to have any type of support.
So transportation. For people who are watching, they say, okay, you've had it in the House, it goes to the Senate. What sort of timetable are we talking about? I know there's a deadline when you have to have things done.
We have to have the budget to the governor's desk the first week in May. So we're getting pretty close to crunch time. The Senate's going to work on it. The House, we spend the first several months. I do sit on budget, and it is a long dry, drawn-out process, because you're sitting down and you're listening to every department talk about the $29 billion that they all need. And everybody is advocating for their department.
Right.
So what we have to do is we have to kind of make it equitable, make it fair, make sure that everybody's got the money that they need, but at the same time, make sure that we're not taking so much money from our taxpayers that is hurting them on a personal level. And there's many times it was midnight, 1 o'clock when we were in the budget hearings. But it's something that's important. It's one of the only constitutional requirements that we have in the legislature to pass a balanced budget, and the other is to have the state of the state and the state of the judiciary speeches. But other than that, everything else is fluff.
Now we hear about, the budgets being very detailed, and sometimes at the federal level there's criticism that they don't know what they're passing, but on the state level, those details of the budget when you're looking at it.
Every line that is expended, and every dollar that comes in, we know where it comes from and we know where it goes, down to the penny. So unlike the federal government, who, just like you said, many times they pass a $1.3 trillion budget and they have no idea what's in it.
Something's hidden somewhere. Right?
Something's hidden. Now, there are times that there are things in the budget that sometimes people don't know. As a matter of fact, since I chair the Veterans Committee in the Missouri House, whenever it deals with the veterans' homes, people come to me and ask me, well, how did we do on the Veterans Capital Improvement Trust Fund? So it's easily enough all our budget books are online. The budget is online for everybody to look at. It's just a matter of to know what words to search for. So we search for the words Missouri Veterans Commission, boom, it pops it up, and I can show what we did last year, what we did this year, and they realize that there's almost a $3 million increase for our veterans' homes, and that satisfied the curiosity of those that had questions. So there's nothing hidden in our budgets like there sometimes are in Washington.
So they get it to the governor first part of May, and he has some time before actually deciding.
He does. He needs to sign it pretty quick because we're done. May 18th is our last day of session. Right. The governor, the only line item veto that the governor has in our statutes, in our Constitution, is for the budget. So the governor can specifically veto a single line, and he has done that in the past. But what we had the opportunity to do is, if that's something that we have as a priority, then we can override his budget veto. But I don't think, if he waits until the first week, we only have one week left, and I don't think there's enough time to get that done.
To kind of push everything together. Yep. Of course, like all levels of government, whether it's local or state or federal, there's that challenge of expenses and revenues. So talking about the taxes is one of those words people, that's a nasty word, but how do you increase revenue to help support this more need for expenditures?
You remember when Walmart was a pretty small business, what they did is they had a vision of building stores all over the country and now all over the world, do it as affordable and make the products as cheap as possible, but you broaden your base. You get so little bit of money off of every sale, but people go in once, 2 times a day, 3 times a day, so you increase your base. And I think that's the same thing. I do not want to increase taxes on our Missouri citizens. The way that you get the revenue in is you increase the number of citizens in the state of Missouri. You open up colleges and universities so people move here, because the vast majority of the students that graduate from Missouri Southern stay local. And we want that to happen. So you increase, just like in my business, I don't want to increase my revenue by increasing the price of my goods. I increase my revenue by getting more customers. And that's the same thing that the state needs to do. Draw people in, let people realize that Missouri is a good state to raise a family, to business, and draw people in that way. And when that happens, that increases our base. And then the sheer fact of providing jobs. We have a segment of society that has been needing assistance, public assistance, whether it's through welfare, through TANF, through food stamps, etc. If we can create jobs, allow businesses to create jobs and put those people to work, then they go from being takers of taxpayer revenue to they're paying into the system, and that is a double whammy that helps out significantly. So we need to do that. We need to increase and broaden our base of taxpayers, and that solves our budget problems.
So does that kind of tie into, we heard, if you receive that assistance, whether it's the food stamps, whether we'd like you to be out there working or try to get that job?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we have a bill that we passed out of the House dealing with the SNAP program, that's the food stamp program, that requires able-bodied individuals that if you're going to receive this money, you need to work part-time, work something, do something to be productive. because we see many times that there are some individuals that are on welfare assistance that they have no motivation to get off of it. So what we're trying to do is do what I, as a Republican, want to do, is to give somebody a hand up, not necessarily just a handout. And once people realize the positive effect of work, there's nothing more satisfying to me to work hard all week and I get a paycheck at the end of the week and I look at that and it's like, wow, I earned that. And most people feel that way. And that's what we're trying to do, create jobs and allow people to realize the worth of work in our society.
Right. Well, another topic I know we've heard through the legislature is dealing with legal reform. That's something that goes back a ways, not just this session. How do you deal
Absolutely.
with the legal system in the state of Missouri?
Well, St. Louis, and pardon my French, but it is considered the hellhole for judiciary and lawsuits and legal actions in our country. Because what has happened is somebody might have an accident in another state, maybe it's in Iowa. And what they can do is have a change of venue, and they actually sue the company in St. Louis because the city of St. Louis, the jury pool that comes out of St. Louis is quite a bit more favorable to the plaintiff in those lawsuits. And there's huge multi-million-dollar lawsuits that come through those courts. And that's not the way that it should happen. If there is an accident in Jasper County, the lawsuit should happen in Jasper County and not automatically gone to St. Louis, where the business or the entity that's being sued automatically knows that they're going to lose multi-million-dollar lawsuits. So we're working at ways of making sure that the venue can't be changed so readily. Okay. And we do that by working on a piece of legislation that specifically says that joining a class action lawsuit, you have to have that lawsuit in the county in which the accident happened. And I think that's common sense. If something happened in Germany, you should not be able to go to California and actually file the lawsuit, et cetera. So for the same reason, you shouldn't have an accident that may happen in Kansas go over to St. Louis. It should happen in that same state.
Okay. So that's something the House is working on, then we'll pass to the Senate?
Absolutely. It's actually already over in the Senate, and we'll see what the Senate will do.
Okay. So that waiting to see what the Senate will do, they're dealing with things on their own, so they're going to be sending things back to you.
Well, considering we have passed, I'm not sure what the total numbers are. There are about 2,000 bills filed this year. And if memory serves me correct, we probably sent about maybe 300 over to them. And I believe they've done 8.
So
there's about 8. They slow things way down. And I don't necessarily think that's bad. The House of Representatives, we represent the people. When somebody comes to me and says, hey, I have a grievance, here's what's going on in my community, I say that's a good idea, and I work on a piece of legislation. We get it out of the House. The Senate slows things down because they'll look at it and say, well, we shouldn't pass laws that maybe benefit one person. It should be benefiting society and our citizens as a whole. So sometimes the things that we do go over there and they pull on the reins and they put a halt to it. But that also means that good legislation many times dies over in the Senate too.
So then sometimes you have to say, like earlier, we have to have a conference committee to work out our differences in many things.
We do not have the filibuster ability in the Missouri House because you are timed. You have a time limit of 15 minutes whenever you're debating a bill. Right. Whereas the Senate, their rules don't allow that. The rules allow people to talk as long as they want. As a matter of fact, every year somebody gets out maybe the phone book or
they're just taking up time.
Somebody gets out the Bible and just starts reading through the Bible, and that's what they do. You have to stand constantly in order to filibuster, but there's times, even this last week until 5 o'clock in the morning, that they were debating a bill and people were filibustering because one person didn't like it.
To tie up the system. Now let's go back to the House and some of the things you've been talking about. We've talked about education. What about senior citizens? We have a lot of senior citizens throughout the region concerned about what's happening when the budget.
There's some things that have happened in the past that I don't agree with. Last year I voted no on House Bill 10 and House Bill 11, but primarily 10 because they did not fund our seniors the way that I thought they should. I believe that we need to protect and defend and help those that are the most vulnerable that cannot help themselves. We have a lot of able-bodied individuals that are on welfare that are able to go out and get a job, etc. We need to try to work really hard at helping them find a job. But we do have a segment of society, some of our seniors that, if you're 80 years old and in a nursing home, you can't just go out and find a job. Your income is limited. And we saw what the federal government did where Social Security went up a little bit, but their Medicare costs went up twice as much, went up higher. So there was an actual negative effect to that. So I think what we need to do is we need to take care of those individuals that cannot take care of themselves. This year we added quite a bit more money. We increased by, I think, 1.75% the amount of revenue that's going into the nursing homes so we can help those seniors out. Because I do believe that we need to help people that absolutely cannot help themselves. And we have some with physical disabilities. I'm working with a gentleman, Sean, with Paraquad, to work on some legislation to help them out, because it's hard when you're a quadriplegic and sometimes being a paraplegic to find a job that is suitable for you. So those type of individuals, the seniors and those with physical and mental disabilities, they absolutely need some help. And we added quite a bit of money in this budget to help them out. Not as much as I would like, but we will see what the Senate does, and we hopefully will be able to increase some of that money.
So tying into care and health funding, we've heard a lot, nationally cries for more money for mental health funding and so forth.
Oh, absolutely. And we did, in our budget, we did put some more money in for Department of Mental Health, because the whole gun issue that you're seeing all across this country, whether it's on school campuses or just out in the public square, if you look at those instances, it has always been some individuals that had some mental instabilities, whether it's the student in Florida, whether it's even what happened just here recently at YouTube, some individual that the family told law enforcement that she was unstable and they need to go find her. It's always been some mental issue that's been involved. So if we can put some money towards that, then I think we can probably address some of the violence that's going on in our country. Because like I said, most of that violence is occurring from individuals that have some sort of mental issue that they need to deal with.
So funding for mental health will help with provide more counselor services to help reach these people and tie them together.
Absolutely. As somebody who's a Navy veteran and I chair the Veterans Committee, we get a lot of bills that come to us dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injuries. And those are things that we have to address. It's hard for me to understand. Of course, I don't have PTSD issues, so it's hard for me to understand what somebody is going through when they do have some of those psychological issues. But it's obviously something that is important because we need to fix that because we do have a large segment of society that does have some issues.
Now you mentioned veterans. Related to that, recently nationally, tying into national stories once again, the president calling for the National Guard to go to the border. People might be saying, well, how's that going to affect Missouri? We have National Guard.
Well, it is going to affect Missouri directly. Of course, the way that our law in Washington, our federal laws are set up is you cannot use active duty military personnel on our U.S. soil. It is, our active duty military is tied to defending our nation against other enemies. But we can use National Guard. So when the president said that he was going to use National Guard members to protect our border, it's not an anti-immigration issue. That's part of the issue that he's trying to focus on. But we have a big problem with illegal guns coming across the border, going to M13 members and to other gang members. We have a huge opioid problem where heroin is coming across the southern border in truckloads that people who used to, when we're of the age when we think of a heroin addict, we think of somebody on a dirty mattress with a spoon and a lighter melting heroin and shooting it up. Now it's a $5 pill, and all of that heroin's coming across the southern border. So I think the president's idea of, hey, let's protect our southern border, let's cut down on the illegal gun trafficking, let's cut down on the illegal trafficking of narcotics, and then also let's address the issue of the immigration problem. I don't think anybody down here is going to say that we want to kick people out, because we've got some great Hispanic friends of mine that are doing a great job in our communities, and I think that they should stay. But we have to control our borders, because if we get too many across the border, then we can't handle the influx of individuals. And right now we're the only country that is not managing that.
So you expect Missouri Guard troops to be serving?
I believe at one point our Missouri National Guard members will probably go down to one of our southern borders, whether it's Texas or Arizona, et cetera, because our Adjutant General, Steve Danner, does a fantastic job and always volunteers our men and women in the Missouri National Guard, because our citizen soldiers from Missouri always do a good job. And if they're called to go down to one of our border states, then absolutely they're going to do a good job, and I'll be proud to go down there and help them in any way that I can and make sure that the funding is there for them.
Great. Well, before we run out of time, I know you are going to be leaving the legislature because of term limits. This is your last full session.
You know, term limits, I'm an advocate of term limits. on the federal level, but you know, it's a sad situation in the state of Missouri. We have term limits where I can no longer serve in the Missouri legislature, or at least in the Missouri House, because I'm at 8 years. So I am done with my tenure in the Missouri House of Representatives. I've been able to serve for 8 years, and it's been phenomenal. I wake up every morning pitching myself because it's a dream come true to be able to fight for the 37,000 people or so in my district. But I get to stay local, run for county clerk, and if I win that race, I'll be able to work in Jasper County instead of Jefferson City.
What do you remember most as far as the legislative sessions? What stands out in your mind as far as the overall impression of it?
The greatest thing that I get to work on is helping people. Most of the problems that people go through are created by government. You know, I believe it was Ronald Reagan who said that his most disparaging words are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Because the vast majority of the time, government is the one that creates the problems. So my greatest satisfaction is when somebody calls up and they're having an issue and they can't get it resolved anywhere else, and with one phone call, I can make a change and help that individual. To me, that's the thing that's most gratifying, protecting life and protecting our citizens, whether it's through a phone call or working on legislation to help.
And you, over those 8 years, have met a lot of your constituents, the 37,000 people.
I tried to spend every day out in the community, whether it's at chamber events, whether it's ribbon cutting ceremonies, or if it's just at town hall meetings, because my title was representative. How do you represent the people if you don't know what the pulse of the community is? So for me to be out there in the public was very important. And whoever takes my place in the Missouri House, I'm going to make sure that I hold them accountable, and I'm going to make sure that they do the same thing that I had the great opportunity to do, and that's be involved in the community and be the true voice of the people that elected them.
Any special tip for success? If someone says, and what's the tip for success? To be
Work hard. Work hard. Get to know people. Even there are people that don't agree with me, my politics side, but I spend a lot of time talking with those individuals. And some of them say, you know, we don't agree with you on this policy, but we understand why you vote the way you do, and we will support you because of that relationship that I have built with everybody.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you for the interview today and all the previous interviews we've done throughout the years.
Absolutely.
And,
I'm glad to do it. You know, if I'm lucky enough to win this county clerk's race, you know, maybe we can talk about elections and things of that nature in the future.
And I look forward to seeing how things turn out in May when the legislature finishes its work
Absolutely.
as well.
A little over a month to go.
So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. I hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.